The Elven Gate Sneak Preview. Written by Linski and Alicia Rades. Narrated by A.J. Carter. The Elven Gate, Prison for Supernatural Offenders, Book 6, will release in 2026. Chapter 1. Charlie. Silence stretched for an eternity and back. The beach that quaked only moments ago became completely still, and I couldn't be sure of how long the stillness lasted. I felt completely detached from my body, as if I existed outside of all time and space entirely as I marched onward into Elameth. My powers noticed the magical signatures of soldiers surrounding me. I recognized them as the young guards who'd sworn to fight for me, though they'd turned against me now. Their hands gripped tight to my arms, and I couldn't find it in me to fight back. After what happened here, nothing mattered anymore. An entire battalion of guards patrolled me through the city streets, escorting me to be judged by my father. My father didn't want to take any chances. I wasn't there to lead my soldiers in the rebellion, nor give orders on where to go and what to do, and so the elves fighting against my father's guard became disorganized. The soldiers had come for me because they didn't have a choice. When I was distracted, Cameron had clearly rushed to the temple and gotten the great mystic to coronate him quickly, so he could become emperor and gain control of the palace's guard. Once he did that, he won automatically, because now the entire military was magically sworn to follow his orders without question. My father had cheated to obtain the throne, because he couldn't beat me out of his own power or merit, though I hardly cared at this point. The crown, which I'd been so desperate to get my hands on earlier, seemed useless and trivial now. More guards joined the battalion to give extra support as they marched me in the direction of Elameth's palace. I could have taken them all out easily, but I just didn't care to. Why even bother? Everything that had ever mattered to me had been ripped out of my soul. Worse, I was the one to do it. Whatever punishment my father had waiting for me, it'd be child's play compared to the complete devastation that was losing my bond to Ava. If he had any mercy at all, he'd take my life. Living this way just wasn't worth it. Obar, I caught my thoughts and gave a low whine at my side. He joined me once the guards had shown up to escort me off the beach, though I don't know why. He should have stayed with Ava. Except I realized that Obar, I believed, remaining at her side would only cause her more pain, in the aftermath of losing him and her magic all at once. Ava. I'd left her there, broken on the sand and still screaming in pain. Our friends had rushed to comfort her, and that was the only consolation I had. At least she wouldn't have to be alone right now, and I was certain she wanted nothing to do with me at the moment. Not after what I'd done. Elves gathered on the streets, gasped in disbelief as the guards took me in. Clearly, they were still in shock that the elvish prince had attempted to overthrow his father. Whispers of shame and sadness were all around, coupled with the sounds of the dying. The city was still in turmoil, from the rebellion and from Ava's destruction, and the citizens were doing everything they could to heal the injured and pull survivors from the rubble. Ava and I had really made a mess of things, except this time, the blowback from our argument had decimated an entire city. Our city. The warden didn't even have to come here, because we'd already ruined it. We were terrible people who destroyed everything we touched. I was dragged to the throne room the minute we got to the palace. It was crowded, swarming with my father's associates and council members. The area instantly went quiet as I entered. I waited at the door for a moment before a guard shoved me forward. I proceeded toward the throne at the end of the room with my head down. I could sense the weak magic of my father resonating off the raised dais. He sat on my grandfather's throne, which was now his. As I walked, I heard the hushed voices of elves all around me, whispering to each other.
"Deceiver,"
a councilwoman said.
"Such a disgrace,"
another added. The degenerating slander continued all the way to the dais. I stopped when I got to the stone steps, and I waited. I bet Cameron thought I would kneel at the steps before him and plead for his forgiveness. I wouldn't, not even now. The only way I'd bow to this man is if he took my head and my body collapsed to the floor. As much as I hated the warden, I'd rather prostrate at his feet than before the coward who was callous enough to call himself my father. "Is it true?" Cameron demanded. "Did you sever the magic of our Holy Mother?" I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. I hadn't been expecting him to talk to me about Ava first. The rebellion, my betrayal, all of those I could defend myself against. I couldn't stand up for myself when it came down to hurting my wife. In that aspect, for wounding her beyond repair, I deserved every brutal pain that this world could give. And I was paying that price, even now, for merely existing without her was agony. Whatever Cameron could do to me would be nothing in comparison to the loss that was my love. My lack of response told him all he needed to know. "You insolent child," Cameron sneered. "Do you realize what you've done? If the princess has no magic, we are not only unable to contact our goddesses, we are also defenseless against Ophiotaurus. She was the most valuable weapon we had!" "I didn't have any choice," I replied, nearly devoid of feeling, because it was just so hard to feel right now. If I hadn't, she would have... "Silence!" Cameron shouted. He wasn't going to even let me explain. "Whatever the princess was in the process of, it was up to you to keep her in line, and you failed miserably. Worse than that, you attempted to take the crown from me, something that has never been done in the history of the Elvish monarchy." "This boy is not one of us! He never has been!" an associate cried, and other voices rose up to join his. "He is an outsider who was never raised among us, and is not of our kind. Castiel made a mistake taking him in. We should have left him on the streets where he belongs." "This is an outrage. We were looking for trouble the moment we brought him into the city." "He is a greedy child, raised in hatred and spite by strangers we do not know, so he cannot understand our ways, no matter how hard Castiel tried to instill our values in him. We cannot forgive this." "Enough!" Cameron bellowed, and the slurs halted as he spoke. "I am the Emperor, and I will decide his fate." "Sire, you know what must be done," a councilman encouraged. "This insurrection is unforgivable. We must take his life. Drea cannot become empress, but she is still young by Elvish standards, and is able to bear children. You must produce another heir to rise after you, and wash this stain of your name." I hoped to gods they killed me, because I didn't want to live anymore. Ava, my friends, the world, they'd all be better off without me. I'd hurt all of them, and a death sentence would be more than a fair sentence for my crimes. At least it'd be a mercy, because then I wouldn't feel like this. But my hopes were dashed as Cameron replied, "I will not conceive another child, not after this one has turned out to be such a colossal disappointment. I do not desire to be a father again, and I cannot take another chance that a second child would turn out to be even worse than he is. Charlie will still rise after me, and he will become emperor after I am gone." Outrage shook the walls of the throne room once again. "Your Majesty, it cannot be so!" an associate yelled. "We cannot expect this corrupt, depraved deviant to become emperor after you step down! You cannot forgive your son for this!" "We cannot blame him too harshly. After all, he was raised without a mother," Cameron argued. "Kelly wasn't there to guide him as she should have." "Because Kelly gave her life for this spawn," another hissed. "An unworthy sacrifice." He had no idea how much I wished that my mother had survived and I had died instead. If she didn't outright hate me from the afterlife, she had to be ashamed of me now. That was the only thing that held me back from wishing for death, the terror that somehow I might encounter my mother on the other side, only for her to berate me and tell me how worthless I was, and that her gift of life to me had been for less than nothing. Because all of it was true. It had to be. Charlie will still rule, but it will be in time. He has much to learn before he does, Cameron stated. My father came closer to me, walking down the steps until he was perched on the one above me, only a few feet away. Obar pressed closer against my legs, his body tense in warning. Cameron paused and whispered, "After all, your grandfather planted this idea in your head, didn't he?" "What?" The word came out in a gasp. Was he really implying what I thought he was? "Don't lie, Charlie. I know my father never wanted me to ascend to the title of Emperor. He made that very clear," Cameron sneered. "He put you up to all of this, betraying me, the rebellion, everything. My grandfather would never do such a thing. Nobody disrespected my Shinari like that. He never mentioned any of this to me, or conspired with me to plot the rebellion," I spat. "All of this was my plan, and mine alone! Don't take me for a fool!" Cameron screamed, and spittle fell across my face. "You aren't clever enough, nor are you experienced enough to have done this all on your own!" I didn't even care that Cameron was calling me an idiot, only that he was slandering my grandfather's name. Blaming Cassiel for my actions was worse than cruel. Whatever Cameron said about grieving his father, he still was resentful toward Cassiel, even in death. Even the associates and the council members in the room seemed shocked. A few low tones of disbelief rang throughout, though nobody said anything to advocate for my grandfather's honor, the spineless weaklings they all were. They didn't believe the coup had been Cassiel's idea, but Cameron was emperor now, and to go against him by speaking up on my grandfather's behalf meant death, or worse, so they kept their mouths shut. "But it doesn't have to be this way," Cameron continued. "I can instruct you in the ways of our family and correct what went wrong. Your grandfather taught you the wrong way, but I can fix what's been broken. I will mold you into a proper prince, one in my image, who will rule in the right way once you ascend to the throne." "I'm not letting you teach me a goddamn thing," I raged. "You have nothing to offer me." "I understand you're upset about the death of Cassiel, but he was my father. I knew him for far longer, and loved him more than you ever could," Cameron replied cruelly. "The loss of a grandparent cannot compare to the loss of a parent, and you are taking things too far when you need to consider my feelings." It was rare that I was ever left speechless, but somehow Cameron had managed to stun me beyond belief. How dare he imply I wasn't allowed to grieve, that his pain was more important than my own? "You didn't care about him like I did," I accused. "My grandfather never said it, but I knew he was ashamed of you as a son. He thought you were weak and weren't fit to rule. I could hear it in his voice every time he spoke your name." "Treason!" one of Cameron's associates cried out, and the throne room broke into mad jeers. I didn't give a damn, because there was nothing left between me and my father to save, so I might as well tell him how I felt. "I fucking hate you. You're no father of mine. I wish my grandfather was still here and you were the one who died. At least then I'd be rid of you, and he'd still be here." Cameron slapped me across the face. The blow was so hard it knocked me to the floor, and I fell roughly against my side. Only a few hours ago, I would have hit back, punched him so hard he wouldn't be able to get back up again. But I couldn't summon the heart to care. Let Cameron hit me. It wouldn't make any difference in how I felt. He could torture me, embrace me, do nothing at all, and all of them would come down to the same result. I'd still be numb. Obar gave a snarl and charged toward my father. "Leave him alone!" A yelp of pain reverberated off the walls, and Obar fell to the ground beside me. I reached out to help him, but when I grabbed whatever had hurt him, I immediately recoiled as a sickness slammed into my gut. I recognized ropes and realized with a sinking feeling that it was the inferricite net I'd had my associates create for me. Eddie had given the inferricite net to my father and hidden it from me. A short time ago, I would have considered him a traitor for it. Now I couldn't muster the strength to blame him. Not for anything. Obar yelped and writhed. A few guards pushed me aside as they came forward, and I heard something metal snap around Obar's neck. As part of your punishment, your familiar will be forced to wear an Inferokite collar until further notice, Cameron said. He will not be allowed to shift forms or exhibit his magic, as you have proven to be a danger in our society. He will still be able to communicate with you, though the bounds of his powers are restricted beyond that. When you have learned to behave, the collar can come off. If you or your friends attempt to remove it, whosoever takes this collar off will be executed immediately. This is your one and only warning. Obar whimpered, and my hands trembled as they ran through his fur. The collar was thick and heavy. It made me sick to be near it, so I couldn't imagine how Obar felt. How could you do this? I asked, and tears stung at the corners of my eyes. You have a familiar. You know how unfair this is, and how much it hurts my creature. My familiar would never conspire against the Empire, Cameron stated coldly. Obar had nothing to do with this! I bellowed. When are you going to get it through your head that you have no control here? Cameron picked me up by my shirt collar, then tossed me down again roughly. The consequences of your actions affect more than just you, as your former associates have become well aware. Fear froze me in place. Were they already dead? Punish me, fine, but don't hurt my team, I begged. They were following my orders. Asa, Ares, Gavin, Max, and Alex will keep their lives, but they have been stripped of their duties and cast out of the monarchy's employment. They are no longer allowed on palace grounds and must start over from nothing, Cameron replied. Of course, no one will hire them nor take them in, due to the disgrace they've caused the family, but they will manage to survive. If they have any integrity at all, they will take their own lives, to preserve what honor they have left, another councilman replied. What about Eddie? I demanded. Edward is bonded to you, and even I cannot break that bond that ties the two of you together, Cameron stated. What you do with him is your business. He is the only remaining servant you will still have at your disposal, even if it displeases him to remain so. The intent was clear. Eddie had asked Cameron if he could leave my service, and Cameron told him no. Remaining my guard was punishment enough for Eddie's crimes against the city. You will keep your title, as you need to in order to become emperor after me, but you are stripped of all your privileges, Cameron continued. You will not be given associates, nor will you be allowed into the city. You will still be able to roam the palace as you wish, but you will be followed at all times by the guards, so they can keep an eye on you and report back to me your every movement. I'm not a child to be babysat. My words were cutting. Even now, though there was nothing left in me, I couldn't find it in me to not oppose my father. I'd given up my connection to Ava because of this, and I would be damned if that resulted in nothing, even if it only entailed gaining my father's spite. No, you are a grown man, one who must learn his place, Cameron snapped, and you will learn the penalty for your disobedience. He motioned to one of his guards. I wasn't aware of what was going on until it happened. A soldier grabbed my left hand, and I felt a dagger slicing through my left pinky. Blood spurted from the wound, and I screamed in indescribable agony as my finger was sliced off. Obar whimpered as it fell to the floor, and I collapsed beside him, creating a puddle of blood on the marble beneath me. I didn't even care about my finger, honestly. I was just screaming because it hurt, out of a physical reaction. I heard myself cry out, but barely registered the actual pain. It was nothing compared to the turmoil inside of me, nothing when placed beside the loss of a piece of me, which was Ava. I was barely here anymore. Cameron could take my finger, my heart, whatever else he wanted. I needed nothing anymore, not unless I had my bond with Ava, and I didn't have that bond. I wouldn't ever again. Stop whining, Cameron scoffed at my cries. It's the finger you use the least, for the gods' sake. I'm being nice. You hardly need it. Be glad I didn't take more, and that the monarchy still needs heirs. Otherwise, your balls would be sitting in a box in my quarters. Cassiel must have taken Cameron's balls after he got back from messing around with my mom then, because it'd explain why he was so worthless now. I tried to say that, but I couldn't. I wasn't able to make any words with my mouth, because the pain was all-encompassing.
Ava was right to mistrust you,
Obar hissed at my father, his words biting.
And I will have my revenge on you, Cameron, son of Cassiel, if it is the final action I take before my breath leaves my body forever.
I was the only one who'd heard it, but even so, a shudder ran up my spine. Obar couldn't heal my severed finger. He'd lost access to healing magic now that his phoenix form was gone, so I continued to bleed all over the room. Nobody went to help me, so I figured I'd probably bleed out. That was fine. Let it happen.
Cameron, stop this at once!
A female voice I didn't know echoed behind me, and footsteps rang across the throne room as someone ran to my side. She knelt beside me, grabbing my mutilated hand.
Treya, he doesn't deserve any mercy,
Cameron hissed. It was my father's wife and guard, Treya. She came to my aid, even though I didn't deserve it. I felt soft cotton on my skin as she wrapped up my hand with a bandage before she stood to face her husband.
Whatever has transpired, he is still your son.
I judged Treya too harshly. She was a good person, someone who was able to prevent Cameron from doing the worst. The only thing she'd ever done wrong in her life was marry the pig that was my father. I felt sorry for her, being tied to a sinking ship like him. Cameron relented. Very well, take him out of here. I do not wish to see him again until I decide to summon him. I was dragged out by guards. I let them do it, because who fucking cared anyhow? My discarded finger was still lying on the floor, and I guessed that was where it was going to stay. They threw me into my quarters. I stumbled into the living area of my tower, and Obar yelped as another soldier tossed him in behind me. These elves had once revered us, but now they were treating us as the worst of the worst. I suppose that was what we were. As I careened forward, I fell into someone. That person grabbed me and held me upright. I immediately recognized Marcus was the one who caught me and felt the magical signatures of several other people in the room, though I was so disoriented I couldn't make out who. People must have gathered here, waiting for me.
Charlie,
Marcus uttered in horror. I could guess that he and all the others were staring at my bloody hand. I didn't bring it up. Instead, I stood taller and choked out. Who's all here? Me, Callie, Ez, Opal, Alistair, and Danny, Marcus replied, his voice even. Where's Ava? I asked immediately. I needed to know where she was, because I couldn't sense her, and she was my beacon in this world. How was I going to navigate my life if she wasn't there to be my light? You don't need to know where she is right now, Callie replied. She needs some space. That was understandable. I swallowed thickly. It wasn't lost on me that Ivy and Chansey hadn't turned up. There was silence until I heard Danny utter, "Dude, fuck you." His voice quivered with rage. The next moment, he completely lost it. His fist connected with a stone pillar, and his hand went straight through it, sending bits of stone scattering to the floor.
I can't fucking believe you,
Danny growled, and he came closer to me.
You better feel lucky that your father only took a finger, because I want to rip your head off right now.
You should, I said hoarsely. Please. Danny huffed. No way. You don't get to take the easy way out. You're sticking around to clean up your shite. He was so mad he couldn't keep talking, or he'd lose control. Danny stormed out of the room, and Alistair gave a hefty sigh.
I can't believe we lost, he grumbled. If you ever want to take over again, I'm right here by your side, buddy.
Alistair, shut the fuck up, Callie snapped. This isn't about you right now. Alistair sulked, and Ez exploded. He started toward me, shoving me backward.
How dare you, Charlie? I will never forgive you for this. You've broken my sister, which she already had so little that held her together. She doesn't have her magic now. She doesn't have her familiar. Anything! Do you think you had the right to do this to her?
No, I said hollowly. Ava would have been better off if she never met me.
You're damn right she would have, Ez snapped. I should kill you where you stand.
Ez, wait, Opal said kindly. She was holding him back, and I heard Ezekiel's gasping breaths as he struggled to obtain control of himself. Then his voice changed, from furious to despondent. Ez took a shattering breath and said,
Charlie, I hate you for taking Ava's magic away. I always will. But...
His voice broke, and he started to cry.
I know how Ava gets when she's out of control. I know you had to stop her somehow, but did you really have to go that far?
She didn't give him much of a choice, Ez, Marcus mumbled. Ez cried harder.
I get that! I've been there when Ava's on her warpath of destruction, and I know it's hard to stop. Charlie, I overheard you a few months ago when you were talking to my dad on the terrace.
I froze. Ez was talking about the night I'd asked for Liam's blessing, before Ava and I had our royal wedding within Elameth. I remembered the conversation well, and every word Liam said came rushing back to me now. He'd warned me Ava would push me past my limits one day, and I hadn't believed him. I wished I'd heeded his warning. Ez wiped his face and went on.
Dad asked if you had the capability to do what needed to be done to handle her. I know if it was my decision, I wouldn't have been able to do that to Ava. You had the strength to do what we wouldn't have been able to do. My dad trusted you, and you made a promise. You fulfilled that promise, as awful as it is. I just wish it had never come to this.
Ez continued to sob, and I didn't say anything, just stood there. What could I say? Even if I apologized for ruining his sister's life, it wouldn't do any good. There wasn't any amount of forgiveness in the world that would compensate for what I'd just done.
You guys act like this is all Charlie's fault, Alistair complained. Ava's got some penance to make too, you know. If Charlie hadn't saved our asses, literally none of us would exist right now. So quit crying about what he did and go blame her.
Alistair, leave, Callie ordered. Or I swear you will not like where you end up once I'm done with you. I expected Alistair to bite back or retort or make a threat, but he didn't. He left, muttering under his breath, though he made sure he spoke quietly enough that no one heard him.
This isn't right,
Opal said in frustration as she continued to comfort Ez.
Guys, we can't do this to each other ever again. You guys fought your significant others. Somebody could have gotten killed. Somebody did get seriously hurt, and it was Ava.
It's always Ava, Callie said quietly. She's always the one who has to bear the brunt of the sacrifice, to accommodate for everyone else's mistakes. She already lost the ability to walk before this, and now she's lost the core of who she is. How much more are we going to take from her? How much more does Ava even have left to give? Her words were a gut punch straight to the core of me. Callie spoke the truth. Ava was the one who'd lost the most out of all of us in this war, and always had been. What happened on the beach was the worst blow of all. I didn't want to keep hurting my wife like this. I didn't want to keep making the same mistakes. Maybe I was bad for her. I tried to force things to be my way, and my wife had taken blows that were meant for me. I figured any consequences for my rebellion would fall back on me, but they hadn't. I lost my finger, the respect for my people, and any chance of having a relationship with my father. But Ava had lost so much more. I'd taken away her magic and Obar, the foundation of who she was. My losses were pale and empty in comparison to hers. Opal's right. Today was fucked up, Marcus agreed. We can fight the Warden, but we shouldn't be fighting each other. I know. This is the worst thing I've ever done. The worst thing that could have happened, I admitted, forcing out the words. I am so sorry, you guys. Sorry isn't going to cut it, Charlie, I said lonesomely. Not after what you did. A lump formed in my throat that was hard to speak past. I know. Just give me the chance to fix it. There was a deep quiet before Callie said, I don't know if it can be fixed this time. I at least need to be given the chance, I pleaded. I literally felt the distaste rolling off the others when I made that statement, because I realized I was a hypocrite. I didn't want to give other people chances when I had decided to bring the world under my command. But now I was asking for one, even when I didn't deserve it. Callie's words wavered somewhere between bitterness and grief as she said, I think it's horrible that you tried to take over Elamanthe, but as much as I despise admitting it, you did the right thing breaking your bond. This was a last resort, and I never would have asked you to do this otherwise. Callie, no, listen, she demanded. I asked you to break your bond in order to save Marcus. That was the only reason, because I couldn't bear the thought of losing him. Don't make my sacrifice be in vain. Work this out with Ava, because if you've hurt her beyond repair, I will lose the last ounce of respect and love I have for you that I've still managed to cling to after the bullshit you just pulled. I've been through a lot with you, and that's the only reason I'm not walking away from you for good. You need to make this right. You need to heal what you broke. Prove to me that you still give a shit about Ava, and about all of us. Otherwise, I'm done with you. That is, if I'm not already. Callie dipped out, and the others followed her, save for Marcus. Callie's absence was tough to handle, because she wasn't the type to give second chances. She always laid down the law and told it how it was, and she made it clear that if I didn't mend things, I was worth nothing to her. Marcus came closer to me, and as he did, I felt myself breaking down. It was easy to hold myself together in front of other people, but not Marcus. He'd seen me unravel before, so it wasn't so terrifying to fall apart in front of him again. It'll be okay, Marcus promised, coming closer. We'll figure it out. My shoulders shuddered, and I managed to ask, How are your burns? Before Ava had lost her abilities, she'd burned Marcus to stop him from interfering with her plans to destroy the world. He'd been unable to move afterward because the injuries had been so intense. They're healed. I found a healer to patch me up right away, but that's not important right now, Marcus insisted. Are you and Callie going to be okay? I asked. They'd just gotten together, and within a few days of their relationship being permanent, they'd participated in a full-on magical battle with each other, one where they didn't hold anything back. We're fine, Marcus insisted. Callie and I don't blame each other for anything that happened. We forgave each other instantly once it was all over. In fact, there was nothing to forgive. You guys got over it that fast? I questioned. I can't blame Callie for taking Ava's side. Not after what happened with the doll maker, Marcus insisted. I'd want everything to end too if I'd just survived a traumatic experience with a serial killer. And she gets why I had to take your side, because deep down she didn't really want things to end either. She just wanted to stop herself and others from being in pain. A temporary lapse in judgment isn't enough to split us up. Even if it leads to something like this. My tone was so barren. My entire world had been turned upside down as a result of my own actions, and I still had my magic in Obar. I couldn't imagine how Ava was feeling right now. You and Ava both made mistakes, Marcus said. None of this is right, but we'll make it better. Tears fell down my face as I grabbed at my hair and pulled. I don't know how I'm going to repair this. Ava has to hate me. Hey, you guys will work it out, Marcus encouraged. You broke my bond with Callie, and that worked out. We're together now. You and Ava don't have a bond anymore, but you're still married. This is the toughest thing you'll ever have to go through, but breaking a bond doesn't mean destroying a relationship. You two can still pull out of this and become stronger, closer even. You think so? I asked. Marcus was giving me back a little bit of hope, and I was terrified to believe in it. But I had to, because accepting the alternative was worse than pure hell. It was a sentence that tightened like a noose around my neck and removed all air, but wasn't enough to actually kill me, though I desperately wanted to suffocate, leaving me in a state of permanent suffering. "Definitely," Marcus said. He put an arm around me and pulled me closer. "Bro, I love you. Your friends love you, even though everybody's pissed, and Ava still loves you, even if you've broken her heart." I broke more than her heart. I shattered her. "She's got stuff to be accountable for, too," he encouraged. "Even if you started it, this isn't all on you. You guys love each other more than anybody I've ever seen. I know you could get through this." I wiped my face. "Okay, I guess I'll wait for her to come back, and we can talk this out." "That's the spirit." Marcus clapped me on the back. "You get ready to patch things up with Ava, and I'll go talk to Callie. We can smooth all of this over." Marcus's words were so level-headed that it gave me some courage. He was right. Marriage had good times and bad times, right? This was one of the bad, no, absolutely atrocious times. I was certain there'd never be anything more terrible in our lives than what had happened today. Even if the warden did his worst, it wouldn't be more than what Ava and I had already done to each other. If we were at rock bottom, the only way to go was up, right? It wasn't like things between us could get any worse. I went into the bedroom. The moment I closed the door behind Obar, he came toward me. "Charlie, does it hurt?" Obar asked softly, nudging my hurt hand. "What can I do?" My infinite sadness instantly turned to rage. Even with the Inferokite collar, I was angry at Obar, and a part of me blamed him for what I'd done to Ava. He'd taken her side, instead of helping me to protect her by calming her down, and it had forced me to make a horrible decision. If I couldn't forgive myself, I didn't want to forgive him either. "Why are you trying to comfort me?" I seethed hatefully as I pushed him away. "Leave me!"
Because I still care!
Obar yelled.
Because I still love you, even though you are testing every ounce of patience that love has right now.
You didn't give a shit when you and Ava were kicking the crap out of me a few hours ago. Well, things have certainly changed, as you now notice, because now we are all stuck here, Obar snapped.
Ava's desire to end all things has now resulted in turmoil, no thanks to you. I had to stop her somehow!
Oh, yes, and we are all paying the price for it, Obar growled.
Quit blaming me! If you had taken my side, we would have been able to subdue Ava without me having to break our bond!
I will never take your side. Not after you planned to imprison Ava away. I made a mistake.
A mistake?
Obar's guffaw was an absolute insult.
You ruined us, Charlie! All of us! Ava certainly had her part to play in it, but it was you who started this whole mess, and I blame you alone for its consequences. None of this would have happened if you hadn't let the power go to your head. Ava chose to destroy the world, but you pushed her to do it. You know as well as I do that you are her anchor, and you steer her in the direction she goes, wherever that may be. How could I have predicted she'd go off the deep end?
I yelled back.
I knew she'd be upset about the restrictions I put upon her. Restrictions? Charlie, you put her in a cage! If you cannot see the devastation such an action gave her, then you are even blinder than you appear.
I cannot be responsible for everything that she decides to do, I spat back.
I can do my best to guide her, control her when she gets out of hand, but I can't take the blame when she decides to do something this radical!
You fail to understand the kind of sway you have over her. These sick ideas that originate in her head don't just pop up without being coerced, and she wouldn't have done this if you hadn't forced her hand. Of course, you're going to take Ava's side. I hugged my arms around myself and turned my back to him. After all, she's your favorite, right?
Oh, fuck you, Charlie!
Obar's livid voice rang out louder than I'd ever heard it before.
I think you fail to see the obvious, for I am certainly being punished for my heart going one way instead of another. Because for the love of the gods and all that is holy, when our bond was broken, I remained tied to you!
Obar gave a wail.
And now my Ava is gone, taken away from me, never again to be reunited with my beloved. She cannot hear me. She cannot feel my presence. I have become nothing to her, and the part of her within our soul is lost. I cannot take any of Ava's soul forms. The unicorn, the phoenix, the narwhal, they are all gone to me now. I am bonded to you only, to the pieces of you that live inside of me, and the pieces of her are gone. Who am I now, except a being cleaved in two?
We could have prevented this, I argued. God damn it, I was crying again. The tears just wouldn't stop.
We could have, but you did not desire to. You didn't take the prophecy seriously. None of us did. So now we must deal with its outcome.
I didn't bother giving him a response, either because I was weeping so hard or because I was just so upset with him. I couldn't tell. Hours passed. I sat on my bed, and Obar laid on the other side of the room, ignoring me. We sat there in silence, ignoring each other's presence, while we waited for Ava to return from wherever she was. As the time passed, my mind wandered. Whatever my friends said about Ava taking responsibility, I still felt like this was all my fault. I'd driven Ava to want to end the world, and I was the one who'd broken our bond. I was a fool to think that I could end suffering, because now I was the one suffering. And worse yet, so was she, suffering beyond explanation. I supposed I would just have to be the villain forever, because that's what I'd become. And if there wasn't any way to mend this, then I guessed I'd just die, because everything else felt just as pointless. Even so, I kept telling myself that this situation wasn't hopeless. I knew I could get Ava back, and there were no limits on what I'd do to prove to her that I'd made a mistake and I needed to make it up to her. No matter what my grandfather had said, I'd find a way to restore our bond eventually and repair our magical connection. Then she'd forgive me, and we could move on. I knew we could work through this. Nothing had kept us apart before, so why would this? I'd do anything to get her back. Anything. The door to my room opened. I immediately stood, bracing myself. "Who's there?" There was an infinite pause that dragged out the endlessness of time and space. Obar held a breath, and I realized then who exactly had entered. My wife. Something inside of me fractured and tore once again, cutting my heart to shreds. I'd never had to ask if Ava was around before. I felt her presence through the bond, and always knew where she was because of her connection to me. If she was far away or close, I automatically knew. I didn't have to place her in my world like I did other people, because she always was. Ava had become one of those outliers for me, a person in my world that I couldn't place. A longing piece of me withered up and died inside. It was like losing myself all over again. I knew the bond was broken, and I felt the empty pit inside of me where that bond once connected us. But it was one thing to know it, and another entirely to experience it like this. The emptiness was all-encompassing, to the point where I wasn't even sure Ava was here at all, and I'd only imagined she'd entered the room. She might as well be a figment of my imagination, because none of this felt real. How could Ava and I exist without one another? It seemed to defy all laws of nature. Again, I was reminded that I was the one who did this to us. I fell on my knees before her, crawling and begging. "Ava, please," I pleaded. "I'm so sorry. I never should have done this. If I could take it all back, I would. You were right. I never should have locked you up. Never broken." I didn't get a chance to finish my sentence because she whacked me hard in the chest with something that crumpled on impact and made a crinkling noise. I caught whatever she was holding and found that it was a stack of papers. What's this?" I asked breathlessly, catching the papers and holding them in my hands. Ava's response was distant. Her following words disintegrated everything that was still hanging on inside my chest, imploding any future we may still have. "Divorce papers," she snarled. "Sign them."